Hey Colts fans, I'm JJ Stankevitz and welcome into another episode of the Colts Show, an Indianapolis Colts podcast. Get us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on YouTube. We love hearing all the feedback we got from the first show on YouTube, on social media. Thanks to everyone who watched that with Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. Check it out if you haven't already. Be sure to check out the first two episodes of High Volume with Jeffrey Gorman as well. Those are in your feeds and on YouTube as well. Coming up on today's episode, I had a chance to sit down with Colts linebackers coach James Bettcher. And I got to tell you, my favorite people to talk to in a football building, are usually the assistant coaches because they have such a wealth of experience and moments that they've had during their careers. And talking to James, we started off talking about him being a first-time NFL coach in a room where he's got to provide information to Robert Mathis and Dwight Freeney in 2012 when James Bettcher was here as the Colts outside linebackers coach. We got into a lot in this, a lot of stuff about the 2012 season, really interesting his perspective on that very special year here in Indianapolis with Chuck Pagano, Bruce Arians, obviously. And also, if you missed that episode of High Volume with Jeffrey Gorman with Bruce Arians, that was the debut episode, came out last week. We also talked a little bit about his experience with Lou Anarumo, and then we had a really great conversation about just linebacker play in 2025, where I brought up a moment from a Bears game in 2019 when I used to cover the Bears that he was like, oh yeah, I got that one on film. Really good conversation with linebackers coach James Bettcher. Go check it out. Here we go. Joining me here on the Colts Show is Colts linebackers coach James Bettcher. You got my text about what to wear, so thank you. Appreciate it.
Just won the match.
Yep. I mean, it looks great, obviously, to
get
be
in and fit in.
Here.
That's what they say.
Look, we get so much free gear, from the team that's all branded, so inevitably this is going to happen at some point. I'm glad that on our second episode with one of our first guests we've had on the show, we're matching here on set. I was talking to you before we started recording about the first year you were here. Yep. So you were here in 2012. As I believe as a special assistant to Chuck Pagano. You were out coaching outside linebackers.
Yep.
And that was your first NFL job.
Yeah.
You were in a room with a Hall of Famer, Dwight Freeney. Robert Mathis, a guy who, for my money, should be in the Hall of Fame. Jerry Hughes, he was a first-round pick. A couple other guys who had some success in the NFL. What did they teach you from, day one about coaching in the NFL and what the highest of high-level football players need out of their position coach?
I totally remember the very first meeting. We're installing quarters coverage, and you have Robert and Dwight, who had been 4-3 defensive ends, rushing off the edge, wrecking games.
Hands in the dirt, yeah.
Hands in the dirt for years. And we were in this process of, building more of a hybrid style defense at the time. And Robert actually wanted to call our meeting room the hybrids. He didn't want to be called an outside linebacker. He wanted to be called a hybrid, because he felt like that just better dictated who he was, and I love that about him. But I'm sitting there, I'm installing the coverage, and I look down, and I think it was that moment, I'm like, these dudes are writing notes. I got Robert Mathis listening to me. Dwight's listening to me. Jerry's up there, they're writing notes. So I must have something of value to add. But I think having a room like that as a first-time anything and being around elite players and the process that elite players have, it's how you grow. And if you're, we talk about it in every position room I've ever had as a coordinator in this league. I've talked about it to our players. It's like maximizing your moment. It's no different as a coach. Wherever you're at, have your feet on the ground, be dialed in. There's something you can get out of whatever you're in. I remember I was a graduate assistant at the University of North Carolina, and I'd went up and visited Chuck Pagano when he was coaching at the Ravens. And so I had a chance to sit in the linebacker meeting room. And in that linebacker room was none other than one of the greatest of all time, Ray Lewis.
Yep.
So Ray's sitting there, and he's just taking – and this is year 12 or something for him. And he's just taking notes, and you observe that. He's had this install 50 times, maybe 100 times, and he's still taking notes on it. And that was Robert, that was Dwight, that was Jerry, that was the work ethic. And I think that just tells you your preparation, being in the moment, wherever you're at, maximizing whatever you can get out of whatever you're doing. And you learn from that, and you share that message on. You could go to Cincinnati and talk to Logan and Jermaine, and they would tell you about stories I'd tell them about working with Robert or working with Dwight and being around elite players and what an elite player looks like. And because if we can share that with other players, we can help them elevate their game.
I mean, starting off with those two guys, and Rob made the Pro Bowl that year.
Yep.
In an incredible year. As that year went on, though, you talked about that first meeting of like, okay, they're taking notes. Like, I must be here for a reason. As that year went on, like, how did your understanding of what they needed sort of grow and develop over that year?
Yeah, I mean, they had elite skill sets as rushers, but what they had to develop and understand is where they fit into the big picture of what we were trying to do on defense. And that's what I know that I could afford to them and give to them. And so I could lean into that. Then on the other side of things, as rushers, as a coach, if you're not learning from your players and how they learn or what they're doing or their fundamentals and techniques that they already have and use, it's crazy. And you would be crazy if you're not learning from that. And I think that's where I grew, was learning, when you're working the one-hand stab or Robert's like dip, speed, rush move on the edge, like what are you looking at pre-snap? How do you know you're trying to get to your third step or your fifth step? Or if you're flipping your feet and you're trying to get to your second or fourth step, like when do you do that? And then those lot of intricate details that are everything, but they're super small. And you're trying to take those from them. That's what I'm trying to take from them, and trying to at the same time give them something and build trust and understanding and a relationship.
Did you ever have a moment? I mean, maybe outside of that first time where you're talking about like, they're taking notes. Did you ever have a moment where it hit you that like, I belong here, I belong in the NFL? Or do you have to kind of operate with that mindset as a first year NFL head coach to just fit in the building and be respected within the building?
I think in this league, it is what have you done for me lately, period. And that's what it is for players, is what it is for coaches. And we have to have something that we provide every day in our jobs of value to those that we're around. And that is giving, not just taking. And so I think that's just what was my mindset, and that's kind of how I was raised. I'm from a small town in northern Indiana, and my dad was a farmer, welder, mechanic. My mom worked in a doctor's office, worked 2 jobs at night just to try to take care of us. And I'm the youngest of 6 and the first person in my family to go to college. So you're built with that mentality of you gotta have your hand in the pile and give something. You got to bring something to the table, and I think early on in my career, that's all I ever did when I was in college coaching. I was working myself up through the ranks to St. Francis, to Bowling Green, to New Hampshire, to Ball State, to the university, like all these different places. I think that's what we learn along the way is like we need to provide something, and that is give to others and serve others. And that's how, 1, you build value where you're at, and 2, that's how you get people to trust you, is because they feel and see the genuine nature of what you're about.
Did you have much connection to the Colts before that 2012 gig? Like, did you go? Because I know that they moved here when you were probably, what, like 5?
Yeah, I was super young when they moved here. Honestly, I don't remember that, but Here's what I know. Here's my connection. My dad had the most gaudy blue Colts sweatsuit of all time. It was complete blue, and it said Colts down. He was a huge Colts fan. Colts down the right leg, and it had like a helmet logo in the middle with the shoe. I mean, they were the bluest sweatsuit ever, and he loved wearing that sweatsuit. And he was a big fan. I remember coming to my first game with him at the RCA Dome, sitting up in the end zone corner with one of my good friends and his dad and my dad. It was my first game I went to with him. So, yeah, I had a connection with the Colts before I came here, and that's, being from Indiana, certainly.
Mm-hmm. What was the game you went to? Do you remember?
I was looking at that the other day. I was like, what game was it? I actually texted my buddy that I was with, Neil Rush, and he's like, man, I don't remember what the game was either. But I remember where we were sitting. I remember we went down to, I think it was called the little indoor, like we used to call it the train station. Downtown, we were walking around, and we hadn't been to Indy a lot of times, so it was all neat for us.
Even from the when you were here for a year in 12 to now where you're here back 13 years later, has anything like amazed you about the growth of this city, about the growth of this franchise within this city during that time?
Yeah, I mean, you walk around the building and you see the things that are new, that are different, from the new cafeteria to the weight room to the expansion of the training area to how the meeting rooms have been changed and constructed and really opened up. Certainly feel that when you walk around the building. You feel a completely different vibe from that standpoint, that, everything that has been going on here is to try to move forward, to progress. Then when you drive, we lived in Zionsville. It was just my wife and I and our oldest, who was 1 at the time. And we lived in the Zionsville area. We rented this like a apartment up there, but we were driving around when we first came over and started looking. It's unbelievable how much things have grown. It's like, I think we were as far north as you could go in Zionsville, or where for the most part things were being built. And now there's like, another 3 miles of homes, north of where we live. So it's pretty cool to see how things have changed.
What's your best Bruce Arians story?
Best Bruce Arians story. The thing I always say about BA is this: he still is, because he still pours into people, but he was an unbelievable developer of those who are around him. When after Chuck unfortunately got sick, and Chuck they were so similar in those ways. Chuck was the same type of person. He pours into people. And so Chuck gets sick, and so one of my roles was just kind of helping organize our practice plans, our scheduling, what situational things we were going to do, what things at practice we were going to do from a 2-minute standpoint. I did that with Chuck a lot. Then I coached the outside linebackers. And so when Bruce took over, those were things I started, because I didn't know BA before he came here. That was my first experience ever meeting him. And he's like, he would say, "Hey, kid, come over here." I said, "Yes, sir." And he's like, "We're going to watch all these 2 minutes together. We're going to show the team." So I have the cut up. I was getting ready and making. I'm like, "Hey, here's a good situation. We could show the team this today, this. He's like, "All right, yeah, you're going to show it to them." And we were 5 minutes from walking to the meeting. I said, "You what? What am I doing?" He's like, "No, you're going to show it to him, explain all the situation on offense, defense, what we'd be in on offense, defense." Because he had told me, "Hey, we'd be in this, this, and this." And I'm writing notes down. He's like, I want you to present it." I'm like, "Okay." So then that became my thing. And what he was doing was, that's the game. The game is like, you got to be prepared, but like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen fast. And how are you ready? You prepare for your moment. Then when it is, you do what you know. So I went in the meeting and presented it. It went well, and that's what I became. I became like the situational master each week, and he had me do that, and he helped me grow and develop. And at first, you're just trying to get the job done. But when you look back on it, the perspective you have is, wow, how much I was able to grow from having those opportunities to help, ultimately coach the team. And you appreciated that. And I love that about him. And that's what he did. He took me to Arizona with him. And a year and a half later, he gives me an opportunity to be a coordinator. And the whole time I'm doing that, he's pouring into me, and he has ever since then. So he's special.
That 2012 year where, you're brought in, you mentioned you met Chuck up in Baltimore. You come here, and that whole year kind of felt like everyone really just banding together.
Yeah.
Where, after he gets sick, you're talking about your role then becomes this. Like, what was the feeling like in the building of everyone kind of, all right, let's do it for Chuck. Let's do it for Chuck. Like, what was that like for you guys as coaches?
If you remember, Bruce had one of the offensive assistants buy these little plastic pieces that held light switches in place, and he left Chuck's light on, and Chuck's light was never turned off in his office. And he had this plastic piece. He put on the switch, so even when someone came in to clean it after they cleaned it, no one could ever turn his light off. And that was our mentality. I don't think there'll ever be a team, and Bruce talked about this to our team at the time, is like, the best teams are the teams that are connected and galvanized. And our galvanize and our connection was the cause for Chuck. And it was, our team played for Chuck. And our team played through that, you think of, Reggie's Orange Glove game to, Gerard Powers in the Packers game with the interception in the second half that really flipped us and got us going. We beat Jacksonville late. We beat, Andrew leads us on the 2-minute. We have the end of game in Detroit where I think it's Vic jumps across the goal line at the very end of the game. Like, these are all but it's all galvanized on a cause. And when a team's connected and they have a common cause, man, teams can be special.
That's got to be a pretty cool lesson to look back on from your first year at this level. Yeah. And, you've been a part of some pretty good teams, obviously, in Arizona. In Cincinnati, like, those lessons have to be kind of enduring of that you can present to players, to other coaches over the course of your coaching career, excuse me.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. You're exactly right with that. And that's what we do is, like, wherever you're at in your moment, you're maximizing it by just being engaged, being there, being the best you can be in that moment. Then you take that and you stack that as part of who you are and your identity, and you take and you share that with other people and you give. And that was kind of like what I was talking about with like Logan or Jermaine, the two linebackers I had in Cincinnati. I'm telling them stories, or I'm sitting talking with Fred Warner in Arizona about like stories about players I've been around or who he's been around, and we all grow and we reciprocate that back and forth to each other. And you do that with coaches too. There's a lot of coaches. I mean, you'd be crazy not to just sit down and listen and hear. I think I played for Kevin Donnelly at the University of St. Francis in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and he said, just make sure in this profession you just shut up and listen. Just don't be afraid to shut up and just be quiet and take it in and listen and actually hear what people are telling you, because it'll help you grow. And there will be never another, 2012. That's a year like that is special. It's a once in a lifetime thing. You get around the coaches you went through that with, the players you went through that with, and you have something that's common. And obviously, Chuck's, it's like the Chuck Strong is coming up here.
Yeah.
And that's pretty amazing. And it's just special to, unfortunate, but special at the same time to have something like that you were part of.
You talked about Cincinnati a little bit. What's something about Lou Anarumo that maybe most people don't know?
Most people don't know. I mean, he has an unbelievable energy. Like I think you would maybe think he's quiet, calm, but he is going to coach guys hard. He's going to demand, and the guys are going to love playing for him because he's going to build strong relationships with them. He's going to respect their opinions, but he's going to be tough. And what the product was and what he wanted the defense to be was a defense that was going to be tougher. We played in the AFC North, and you had to be tough to play in that division. And that's the type of defenses he built, and ultimately won a lot of games in Cincinnati because of the type of defenses that him and the players had put together over the years he was there. He's a great friend of mine. We've worked together at a couple places, and I'm lucky, and I appreciate our friendship.
With the way that he schemes things up, I mean, I know players in Cincy called him a mad scientist, and that as a coach, how does that challenge you when you might have to, coach a different scheme every week, a different technique every week, just to fit it to the opponent that you're facing?
Yeah, I love it because that's what I'm all about. And we, him and I, that's why we have such a great relationship. We see the game so similar. And we see the needs of the game and the needs of what we need to do on defense to be offensive on defense, and that's what he is. And it's constructed, though, in a way that our players don't have to learn new techniques every week. We teach scheme, then we plug those little intricate details and schemes and techniques into big packages. So there's a lot of same as in the teaching. So you might have a technique that you use in this call, but you're also going to use in this call. And, hey, this week we're going to do this, but that's just this technique that you already know. And we have just a lot of same as. That way we can build some complexity with simplicity at the same time. And that's what's fun about it. That's why the players love doing it. That's why they call him a mad scientist, because it's fun and they're doing a lot of things. And, you get to be a versatile player in this system. You get to do different things. You get to present issues for offenses in this system, and that's why it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun to coach in, and it'll be great and fun for our players to play in.
Where has the off-ball linebacker position evolved during your time in the NFL?
Yeah. The game has changed so much. It used to be big personnel groupings that made like big looking formations. And now the game is, they might be big personnel groupings or small, but everything is space oriented. And the game is so space, it's a space game. And they try to, as the wider the field gets or the wider the offense creates the field, the more space the linebackers have to play in. And that is the biggest thing over, the last 5 to 10 years that this league is just the space play that you have to be able to operate in. That's one. And two, just as systems become, maybe the word is complex, but have layers to them, the linebacker positions become more and more of a quarterback. Just the mindset of the player, how smart they have to be, how able they have to be able to lead on the move, not just in the locker room, not just, stand in front of the team, but on the field as things happen, being problem solvers during the course of a game. I think those are the two things that's really shifted and changed in that position.
What makes for a good linebacker blitz?
Oh, a good linebacker.
Like I know that's a very broad question because that can go a number of different ways.
Yeah.
But
I had like 10 things pop into my head. I got to say the one. A good linebacker blitz lets the linebacker just get downhill and attack the line of scrimmage. That's the best. There's a lot of different patterns, and there's picks, there's rubs, there's cross dogs, there's all these different things you can do.
Coffee house, my favorite.
Yeah, you can coffee house. You can pop out, act like you're dropping, then go right. Coffee house. But
when that hits, by the way, that is like one of the most aesthetically pleasing things.
It's fun.
You can see. Yeah,
it's fun. I've had a player once that said, "I want a coffee house blitz," so I wrote it up on the board, "Coffee house by the Monday Night Football game," because he said he wanted to do it on a primetime game because he wanted to try to do exactly what you said. So we put it in, and it actually failed miserably.
For our listeners or viewers, I guess, a coffee house blitz is where a linebacker fakes like he's blitzing, kind of turns to fake like he's dropping out, and then does blitz. And the goal is to get like the guard to take his eyes off him.
Yeah.
And funny you mentioned that. The first one I saw hit, that's like ingrained in my head. I used to cover the Bears, and Danny Trevathan hit one on 100%. Monday Night Football.
I got it on tape.
Do you have that exact one on tape?
I have that clip on tape.
Let's
I know
go.
exactly what you're talking about.
It was against Washington.
Yes.
And I remember seeing that and being like, that was one of the most aesthetically pleasing things I've ever seen on a football field.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But I think just overall, like, get downhill, let them attack the line of scrimmage so they're blitzing and going fast. Like you blitz for different reasons. Sometimes, it's perfect if you beat a protection, you get a free runner. But sometimes it's just so your players can go, so your players can attack. And you're not sitting and keying and reading. You're attacking the offense, and you're trying to take the fight to them. And so I think that's why I like pressuring, and that's one of the reasons.
When guys get back in the building for the off-season program next week, what is that first maybe month stretch before you get on the grass for OTAs? What does that look like? What is going on in James Bettcher's room?
Well, I think the first thing we're doing is we're reestablishing the standard. There is a standard here, and the standard will be here. It was here before I got here. It'll be here long after I'm here. It's the Colts standard. And just reestablishing that and talking about that. What are we going to look like as linebackers in 2025? What is our room going to look like? And I'm going to talk about things. Then our players are going to talk about things. What do you want this room to look like? Because, okay, now we know what we want it to look like. Here's the things we need to do to make that happen. And that's going to be one of the first things we talk about. We have some film to watch. And all the film that we'll watch it'll be the guys in the room doing those things. It'll be some guys on some other teams doing those things. It'll be guys in some other sports doing those things. And ultimately, it's building the imagery of what we're going to be about. Then from there, it's scheme. But it's identity first. It's building identity in our room. Then we'll certainly get into details of the scheme and techniques and all that.
We'll have plenty of time to talk about all of those with you and with Lou and with all the coaches later. But, James, appreciate the time here on the Colts Show.